I've actually written something. It's about 15 minutes long. I'd love to pause and expand on the points that I'm making, but I'm very aware that Rob is very serious about keeping me to time. So I will just read my presentation, and I welcome discussion and comment afterwards. Okay, picking up really where Claire started. When Rosalind Krauss, in her famous essay, Sculpture in the Expanded Field of 1978, conceived a structural diagram to account for post-1960s sculptural practice that positioned its newest forms in relation to architecture and landscape in a relational grid that justified its expanding formats and, in passing, provided one of the most succinct accounts of an entire history of Western sculpture in the public domain, from the Renaissance to the present, she left out of her equation two crucial dimensions, the social and the temporal, that I think are critical to an understanding of the latest direction sculpture in the public realm has taken. I want to turn exactly to these two terms, addressing what role they play to rethink Krauss's model and posit a new set of coordinates to suggest that what is going on today is as much a condition of the history of the medium as the formal advances Krauss catalogued exactly 30 years ago. Now, like Krauss, I'll invoke a history marked by ruptures rather than seamless continuities. But unlike her, I'll grant these human rather than purely artistic motivations and consider these in light of political circumstances that are especially inescapable in the world today. Now, Krauss's definition of the monument as a commemorative representation that sits in a particular place and speaks in a symbolic tongue about the meaning or use of that place grants to sculpture a role in representing a past event for a future public, which secures its function as a marker in the grand unfolding of historical time. But I suggest that her account needs to be qualified by an equally pressing realization that monuments also exist in the humdrum here and now. To the permanence of the monument, we must add its imminent contingency. Just think of a public sculpture and note how its surfaces can be sullied, bits can be broken off, birds can use it as a perch, skateboarders ride it, developers move it, vandals break it, or in the example on the screen here, artists can reuse it. So what I'm suggesting then is that a monument may be defined as a permanent structure serving an historical purpose that can be located within an artistic lineage, but it's also a physical object subject to arbitrary circumstance. In other words, it's prey to the pressures of everyday time and the actions of ordinary people. To Krauss's concern with sculpture and sight, we must therefore add or juxtapose notions of action and event. Nowhere is this more obvious than when we canvass the many occasions when public monuments have been the target of political attacks. This, according to Dario Gamboni, is a little appreciated aspect of the monument's identity and its relation to history. His study of occasions when art has been damaged or destroyed offers a counter-narrative to conventional histories of art, shifting attention away from art as a separate category and from the artist as originating creator to take into account crucial questions of reception and context. This has the effect of rethinking the monument as a temporal and contingent device that can be redeployed by people. Rather than commemorate the past, it can puncture and arrest history, proving a pointed tool in the present. Tracing the history of iconoclasm and vandalism Gamboni has compiled, one can't help but note that sculpture in this account no longer embodies eternal values associated with physical permanence and aesthetic quality. Rather, it is disassembled in the competition between rival groups in society and skewered on the specific details of particular moments, and then dispersed in a myriad other forms as news of events is disseminated. So here, for example, on the 16th of May in 1871, French communards in Paris tore down the Vendôme column, a derivation of Trajan's column erected by Napoleon, who in turn had replaced a royal statue, in a representational gesture expressly designed to destroy a symbol of tyranny and militarism. Now, this act may be the reverse of conventional artistic production, but the gesture is still symbolic, and it survives in visual representations that circulated in the popular media. Thus, attention to the real object that has survived from the past is relocated in the action and its immediate circumstances. The displacement from singular object to multiple documents that follows is an inevitable outcome of the column's destruction, and a vital component of the temporal and social dimensions which I'm addressing. So, to our new components of action and event, we must add the dislocated coordinates of the placeless document. So, if the monument can be recommissioned as a representational gesture at odds with its maker's or instigator's original conception, then its reproduction and dispersal as image is equally an element of its newly expanded meaning. I'm going to dwell briefly on a particularly telling and relatively recent incident to bring us to the present as the final framework for my discussion. Okay, so Reuters photographer Goran Tomasevic was on the ground in Baghdad after the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. On April 9, he was one of the many journalists who witnessed the dramatic toppling of a bronze statue by artist Khaled Izzat, completed on commission to Hussein in 1992, that was located in Firdous Square. This was undertaken by Iraqi citizens and assisted by US troops who had only just entered Baghdad for the first time in the conflict. Pictures like this one, as well as live TV coverage, instantly circulated the scene to signal the fall of Saddam's regime after 3 weeks of intense fighting. To many, it became the symbol of American success. Events could here be condensed into a single meaningful image, the literal fall of Saddam's statue. This conforms perfectly to that long history that Gamboni has compiled of the many occasions when statues were destroyed to mark traumatic regime change. Tied up here as well is an aesthetic subtext that dogs the history of public monuments and offers one reason for the lack of regard we often offer them. I think this was the sneaky gratification that accompanied the destruction of one of the execrable statues Hussein had erected to himself, an example of a kind of despotic kitsch that characterized the artistic efforts of his regime. Bad art was going with a bad man.